public hearing. This is a resolution of the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Emeryville approving a disposition and development agreement between Emeryville Redevelopment Agency and Placeworks LLC to develop a commercial project at 3645 San Pablo Avenue, otherwise known as the Flatiron Commercial Project. This is in conjunction with the City Council item 6B. Michelle.
Good evening, Chair Davis and members of the agency board. As indicated, this item is to consider two resolutions for a disposition and development agreement for the redevelopment of 3645 San Pablo Avenue, former location of the Jug Liquor site, with the Flatiron Project by Placeworks LLC. This DDA was previously presented to the agency on October 2nd, also at a duly publicly noticed hearing for consideration and approval. However, due to concerns expressed by several members of the agency board about some aspects of the DDA, the agency voted to continue the item and directed staff and the developer to continue negotiations in order to address those concerns. Those concerns were that the building, as it was intended as a speculative project, might sit empty and contribute to the additional blight in the neighborhood and depress the commercial area. The agency also wished to have greater discretion over the tenant selection for the property, and they also want to know how the property might provide for public art. In order to address these concerns, staff and the developer have revised the DDA with the following provisions. A new provision has been added which requires the developer to provide a purchase or lease agreement and a business plan, regardless of the user type, for review and approval by the agency prior to and as a condition of a close of escrow. This will provide that the building will be occupied by a user prior to completion. If the agency does not approve this purchase or lease agreements or the business plan prior to the close of escrow, the developer will be allowed the option to terminate the DDA. Additionally, the agency may terminate the DDA if the developer does not provide a purchase or lease agreement, or if the agency does not approve the purchase or lease agreement. In terms of discretion over the tenant selection for restricted uses, as you may recall, there were two categories, uses that were of restricted uses. Ones that were going to be restricted for perpetuity, and one specifically mattress stores and fast food chains that were to be restricted for a period of 7 years. First, the requirement for the agency to acquire the building if an unacceptable use has been proposed has been eliminated. In its place is a similar approval right for a 7-year period. So we no longer have to, if we deny one of the restricted uses, have to purchase the building. We can simply deny it. Unchanged from the previous DDA, the developer must request approval for other uses if they want to propose a restricted use. The agency has 30 days after submission of the request to have a hearing on the proposed restricted use and a total of 40 days to respond. A lack of response within 40 days of submission of the request will be deemed a denial. In the event of an agency denial and during the 7-year period discussed above, the developer may return to the agency with proposal for another restricted use or may proceed through the typical approval process if it is not a restricted use. Agency approval of the request does not otherwise relieve the developer, its successors, or assigns from securing any and all necessary required permits and approvals from the city or any other governmental agencies affected by the construction, development, or operation of the restricted use. Lastly, with respect to public art, the developer will make an in lieu contribution to the public art fund rather than developing art on the site. Redevelopment of this site with a high quality and architecturally interesting building will help to leverage the previous investments both the agency and private developers have made on the corridor. Across MacArthur and San Pablo Avenue, respectively, marketing efforts for both the Adeline Place project, currently under construction by the same developer, and the proposed MacArthur-San Pablo mixed-use project will greatly benefit by the development of this site, particularly if occupied by a high-quality tenant, to visibly demonstrate the revitalization of the area and the agency's commitment to the same. Staff recommends that the agency After hearing a report from the developer, who is also here, open the public hearing, take public testimony regarding the resolutions, and then close the public hearing. Then consider the staff reports, attachments, and any public testimony, and adopt both proposed resolutions.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we hear from the developer?
Good evening. I'm Stuart Rickard with Placeworks, and congratulations to those of you who have been reelected. This project, we're back before you for two reasons, or for the reasons that Michelle mentioned. I think we've answered the question about whether the building will be vacant. We always anticipated needing to have a user in order to get financing, so we anticipate that to occur. But there is another reason we're here tonight, and which I'd like to talk about, which is that last time we had a meeting, the neighbor of the site, Daryl Rush, came forward and expressed some concerns about the project. And I've spent some time with him to walk through that, his concerns, and try to address them. It does cause me some consternation to be addressing those concerns at this late date, after we've been through a long process of planning approvals and working through an alternatives analysis with the staff. But Daryl sent me I've had lunch with him a couple of times, and he sent me something last night that explains what he would like to do. And I had told him on Monday that when we worked with staff to figure out what the goals of the agency were, we did a very, very thorough search, and there were some things about his proposal that I think don't meet that, meet those goals. One, and I'm sure you'll see his proposal tonight, his building is smaller and probably as expensive to build as the Flatiron project that's been proposed. And so the amount of value in the building is probably less, and the costs are the same. So I'd expect the assistance to be more. But more importantly than that, it's a very specific use that can happen in that building. What I got last night shows a restaurant on the ground floor and residential for the restaurant owner on the second floor. And that combination means that there's really a very, very small niche of users who can be in there. The other, so I wanted to mention that to you, because when I worked with him, I said that's, I think those are going to be issues that you have with that proposal. The other issue that he had was a concern about the Flatiron building proposal overpowering his building. And so Sudesh has prepared a presentation about that issue.
Good evening to you all. This is a brief presentation, and you've seen this a number of times, but I just wanted to recap in saying that the context of this particular area is...
Sudesh, if you're going to talk off to the side, you need to get the other mic. Okay, thank you.
There we go. The context here is a unique one. As you can see, it's a vast, open, asphalted area. It's interesting to note the Jug Liquor building was actually quite a bit taller than the than the neighboring building here, which is one of the shortest buildings on the site. And these are just different views of the various buildings around. As you can see here, we've done an elevation of this entire sort of block or block and a half, starting from the freeway, looking over west. And you can see here, we have, right next to the freeway, we have a substantially tall 2-story building. Then we have a 3-story building next to it. Then we have a 2-story Sen's restaurant that has a small 1-story addition that recently done. And then, of course, we have a 1-story building here, and then our proposed building, and then, of course, on this side, Adeline Place and the next door Gravestock building. So you can see here that our feeling is that actually having a slightly taller building in this location next to the building, in fact, enhances the block and particularly the neighboring building. And I'll illustrate an example. Traditionally, streets always have and have had historically buildings of 1, 2, or 3 stories. Now, what I want to illustrate is that if you notice in some of these scenarios, the buildings that are shorter would actually, I think, would feel visually they would be less distinguished if all buildings were same height, because you wouldn't be able to distinguish them. So in a way, what we have done here, and this is a profile down, you can see the Sen's building, and then the building next to ours, and then the building here. By having this profile, you're actually distinguishing. So it helps both buildings to stand against the skyline and be distinguished. And I think that's sort of it's a subtle point, but I think it's important that the variation continue. If this building were to be lower, I think it will be detrimental to not only the block, it will look very strip center-like, where everything extremely horizontal, but I think also it'll be detrimental to the neighboring building. So that's the point I wanted to make, of course, and the other, finally, I think something that Stuart sort of referred to, and I want to emphasize that again. The emphasis of what we've done here is to design a building that is serving its master, and the master is the customer on the street, the pedestrian, on both Adeline and San Pablo. None of us can predict what is going to happen in these 2 blocks 25, 30 years from now. What we can predict, and from my experience, the buildings that were designed for a single use, whether they are on College Avenue, Solano, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, have 5 uses now, and the buildings that were designed for 5 uses have a single user. Buildings evolve, and what we want to do here is come up with a flexible, a building that casts a wide net, so that if you look at these diagrams, over time, it is adaptable as a single tenant, 2 tenants with this configuration, 4-tenant building, and again 2 tenants in this configuration. The point essentially being that the building is serving the street and the street edge, and it should be, especially in an area that we're trying to revive, it should cast a wider net as to who it appeals to and the various tenants. And I think I'll wrap with that. And Stuart, you have one thing you wanted to, I think. That.
The other reason, I have a great personal investment in seeing this project go forward. But in addition to that, I would like to point out that the Adeline Place project also has an investment in seeing this project move forward, because when we have residents come to buy the units there, and we're all investors in that project, it's really important that they see an active use on that corner, and that intersection that we've been working on to reduce its size and to make it more pedestrian friendly, that there is a project there that they can look at. And I think that's really important for the Ambassador project. I think it's really important for Stanley Sadowitz's project that this project moves forward and there's an attractive use at that corner. I wanted to hand out a couple of letters that I received from nearby retailers and from the owners of the Avalon. What's doing this? And I'll go ahead and read these to you because one is from Maz, which is the retailer across the street. Dear members of the Emeryville City Council, we at Maz Glass would like to encourage the approval of the Flatiron project across the street from us. We have been merchants here at 3840 San Pablo Avenue for over 20 years and have witnessed the commitment and endless efforts the city of Emeryville has put forth to improve our neighborhoods and city. We would like to benefit from this invaluable city upgrade in our close proximity. It would only help boost the commerce for everyone in the immediate vicinity. Many thanks in advance for your special attention. Sincerely, Paul Akbari, Principal of Maz Glass. And then there's one from the Avalon, and the Avalon is a building that has vacancies in it. And Sudesh has mentioned before that creating more retail space that is really good helps lease up the space that's secondary and not quite as good. So here's what Lynette Lee, who's the executive director of Ebaldsey, says. Ebaldsey, a co-developer and manager of Avalon, a complex providing affordable rental units for 66 senior households with retail at the ground level, is supportive of the Flatiron building. We have worked with the city to create an active retail environment at the street level along San Pablo Avenue and Adeline Street. As you know, retail works well when desirable uses are clustered together within walking distance. The Flatiron building will bring more shoppers and activity to our neighborhood, which will help our building. We urge you to support the Flatiron building, which is a continuation of the City of Emeryville's commitment to improving the San Pablo corridor. So I wanted to share that from the neighbors. I'll briefly go through the interest that we have in the building right now. I've had a number of discussions. There is a restaurant that's interested in the building. They're interested in seeing whether the city and redevelopment agency will help them with financing, and I can walk through that with the staff. There's another user that's an established bike store, and I think the original concept of a bike store does make a lot of sense for this site because of its visibility, because it can survive as both a destination user and as a destination retail use and also as something that's community serving. And I would say that's our most promising user right now. So I wanted to give you an update on that. I also wanted to say that, this has been a very deliberate, careful process that we've gone through, and although I am careful and deliberate, I want you to know that I am very committed to this project, and it's very important to me to see this happen. And I think it's going to be a great project for the city. So thank you for your time.
Public hearing is now open. Anyone who wishes to speak, come forward.
Gerald Rush. I'd like to. Thanks.
I'm Darrell Rush. I'm in the building next to the Flatiron proposed building. I've been there for over 15 years and seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood, and I'm definitely for developing the neighborhood. And one thing I missed, they didn't mention tonight, is he doing it without public money now, or is it still public loan and giving the land? It wasn't mentioned tonight. See,
Michelle.
It's the same terms.
Same terms, okay. I never did step forward before because I thought it was just a private development and there wasn't much I could say about it. But with public funds, I find my complaint about the building wasn't the size or wasn't the height or any of those things. It's just that it wasn't an attractive building and didn't fit aesthetically with the neighborhood, was my complaint. And the fact that it was such a, like Sadish said, a broad net to bring in pedestrians and a broad net in terms of multiple uses, to me, it's like thinking within the box. Number one, we don't have any fish, so the net doesn't do much good because the sidewalk doesn't attract people. And this particular building, I don't see why it would have a ghost's chance. And it's actually too short. The one that I'm proposing that you see in the fourth page, I think there, is 48 feet tall. And I've done and if you want to see the costs on it, I've done costs. It would be about half the price of the proposed building. So as far as the burden, it would be, for any kind of a tenant, would be greatly reduced. And as far as my building being small, it's short. I have considered building a second story on it to increase the density, because I was talking to Mr. Fricke earlier today, and he said that that's part of the goal of the San Pablo corridor is to have higher density. And so that was one of my considerations in the future, is to build a second, possibly even a third story on top of the building. We're an artist collective, and I wanted to remain that way, trying to figure out how to do that. And the impetus of what I think that corner needs is a very tall building. I don't know where Stuart got the idea I wanted to do a short building. I want it to be much taller than what they proposed to frame that intersection. And for like I mentioned in my text, for pedestrians to feel safe in such a vast piece of asphalt like that, the tower would give a sense of calmness to the neighborhood, a sense of being a place. And with the coming residences that are going to be in the neighborhood, there's across the street on the other side of San Pablo is, I think, 100 units or 95 units or something like that. Very, 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 very big project. That is the Ambassador Laundry, and then there's Stuart's place that he's putting in. And this would be right in the middle of all that, where people could walk to eat, and it would be a much lower cost project. And so that's why that was my reasoning. I don't want to throw a wrench into things, but I don't also want to see something built that, I mean, the occupancy of that would have to be $10,000 a month, that particular building. And I mean, it's pretty absurd. Anyway, so I was hoping we could get a building that would rent for less and put out, and serve the community in a much more, well, in a way that would be important to the community and would get pedestrians out and make people get out of their cars or just feel like, I mean, it could be the living room, because a lot of these are studio apartments. And in Europe, I lived in Europe for several years. People did live in small homes, and you didn't meet in your home, you'd meet in a restaurant like that. And so it's a European concept, but I think we're ready for that with the high density that the future holds for us. It doesn't beckon another retail space. Emeryville has plenty of retail space, but we just don't have places to meet, and especially in this neighborhood. So that's my comment. Any questions?
Anyone else like to make?
Darrell, sign in.
Sign in.
Hi, my name is Vicki Sewell. I live at 3618 Peralta Street. I've lived there over 22 years. And the neighborhood has improved. I think I'm pro your development, but I'm afraid of the cost of your tenant. I don't see how anyone can afford to rent a building there where there's not a lot of traffic, where there aren't a lot of foot traffic or places to park. When people come there, I think they will need a restaurant. If those condos come in there, we could have an anchor project. When I say we need a plan for that area, everyone talks about the star development, even you guys, and all I see is more condos. Now, I'm glad if the plan is to bring people there, you're going to hopefully succeed, but the people need a reason to cross the street to go to that area. And it's good. I think the only thing that can serve it is a restaurant for all those people who live there. So if you, like a Mendy's Bakery is a successful business here. I thank the city for helping support them, but I think that draws other people. People ride their bikes there, people walk there. We need something where people will walk to. So if it costs too much for them to rent a new building that costs $2 million to build, I don't know what kind of tenant you're going to get. We have an empty building that's very large on the other corner, that's very tall, that no one is in, and I think the rent is too high in that building, and no one is there. So an empty building is a depression to us. That is just a new building at a corner that is depressed, if you leave it a brand-new building like that. So get the anchor tenant first is what I suggest. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Valerie Perez Bartolasa, and I am the owner of a small business, Retret Home, located at 3811 San Pablo. I've been there since '97, and it's been a long haul, good haul. I've liked the change that I've seen. I think it's really important that we continue with the focus of revitalizing to draw people down San Pablo. Once you hit 40th, make a right, not just make a left and go out of Emeryville to Berkeley. And I think it's really important to show new, fresh, but integrated design that's going to anchor that corner to the Gravestock building, if you will, and also the new building that's going up next to us. Because if you see from 40th a building that works well with the rest of the street, the nodes, the paths, everything that's going on, it's really going to let people know that it's not the kind of interesting, colorful neighborhood that it was, but something that is going to be inviting. As far as a tenant, I think that if there's multiple use in a building, that it is open for mixed use, if you will, whether it's a gallery, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's coffee. I think that's really important. Having one use and having it just be kind of tunnel vision is scary because there's a lot of change, and we don't know where that's going to go. Hopefully, it's going to be really good. I think density is there. There's no other way to go but up. But I do think that we need to make sure that the elevations look and have some continuity with the existing buildings, whether it's Maz or the building that I'm in, or the lofts that are down at the corner of 40th and San Pablo. So I just hope that, we go forward with something that has a lot more planning and thought behind it, and that we don't really change our focus because we have a new idea that just popped on. But I honestly think that the elevation that was put forth with the existing building adjacent to the Adeline Place is a really cool, modern, yet doesn't move too far away from the older buildings and elevations that are there. So hopefully you'll, move forward with this, and we can just move on and grow and not take too long so that I can still be there when this is all done. Thank you very much for your time.
My name is Michael Camp. I'm the owner of Bake Sale Betty in Oakland, and I was approached both by
You're the owner of what?
Bake Sale Betty. It's a
Okay.
bakery in Oakland on Telegraph Avenue, and I was approached both by Stuart Rickert and by Del Rush, and I have to admit the design put forth by Stuart is a solid solid design for a retail occupant or a restaurant or some sort of food service similar to what we do, and I gave him a lot of credit for his consideration. I thought our space could work well in his design. I think there's a number of other businesses like ours that could work well in that design. But I do want to give, I think, and this is an important thing, is Daryl's creative vision and just some due. I believe he does a really nice job with his building on the block. Has a tremendous creative look to it, and it's an inspiration to myself. I drove by it many years when we used to bake in Emeryville, and was always drawn and found it very attractive and unique. And I don't believe that there's any particular uniqueness at this point to Stuart's design, and I do think there is in ideas put forth by Daryl, and if that's a point of departure, that would be one thing. I don't want to be misrepresented because I've been both approached by Daryl and by Stuart as perhaps a potential occupant. I do think Daryl's vision is inspired and should be given maybe a little bit more thought, and I'm a big fan of the retro at home retail space, and I do agree that architecture that is complementary to that building in particular would be perhaps something positive. Thank you.
Anyone else like to come forward and speak? If not, the public hearing.
I'm actually here for a different subject. I just want maybe some clarity on. My name is Laura, and I'm a recent homeowner in Emeryville. I'm also a teacher at
Closer to the mic.
I'm a recent homeowner in Emeryville, and I've been a teacher at Annie Yates for the past 6 years. I've emailed you a few times. I'm here for the train. So I just want to know kind of where we're at with establishing a quiet zone or whatnot.
Oh, no.
'cause
This is a public hearing on a specific item, a specific
This isn't an
building.
open thing to talk about?
This is not public comment.
When can I talk about the train?
The train is on the agenda. It will come forward.
Can I talk later about the train?
You can talk later about
You'll see me later.
I'm glad you came, Laura.
I'm glad
Are
to be
there
here.
anyone else want to speak about the Flatiron building?
I wasn't sure I came late.
If not, the public hearing is closed. And what is the pleasure of the council?
He carries a gun.
I have some questions.
All right.
Well, first of all, I raised some questions the last time this was on the agenda, and the language in the DDA responded to that, so that part is satisfied. I have some new questions that I didn't talk about before, which I want to raise, which is mostly for staff, actually, Stuart. You're off the hook here, but the way I figure this building is going to cost to build $625 a square foot, according to the information in the staff report. And of that, the reuse value of the project site represents approximately 2% of total development costs. Why on earth would the redevelopment agency want to contribute a hefty chunk of change to build something that's so expensive in a surrounding area that, as other people have mentioned, we wouldn't be able to recoup rental costs from? So why is this a good investment for the redevelopment agency to make, to build such an expensive building?
The purposes for this building are the prime reason it's sort of run through in the 33433 report. But there are some issues that cause the building's cost to be higher. One of them actually is simply our participation. Once the agency participates in a project, it has to be at prevailing wage, so that will increase the project costs. Perhaps the biggest factor, though, affecting it is that the São Pablo Urban Design Guidelines ask for a building that comes to the street edge such that it's not pulled back. And because of the small size and the irregular shape of this property, it's a triangular shaped building and it has a lot of building frontage. The building frontage is actually what we want the most out of it. That's the aesthetically pleasing portion of it. However, it's the most costly portion of the building. And because it's such a small footprint, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of the cheap portions of the building to be factored into that overall per square foot cost. A cheaper building could certainly be possible, but it would not likely meet our standards for what we had wanted to meet the São Pablo Urban Design Guidelines. It would likely be smaller, a much smaller building, likely rectangular, pulled away from the edge, which would actually contribute to that intersection feeling larger. So a large reason for that is because of the design that we've asked for. Does that get to your
Yeah,
concerns?
and a quick question for Stuart, actually, is your presentation, Sadisha's presentation, talked about fungible uses and some ways of dividing that up and whatnot. Is it being built with the possibility of a food use?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you answer that on the record? That yeah, is not going to show up anywhere.
Yes, it's being built with the possibility of a food use.
I'm done
Any
with my
other
questions.
Any other comments?
I just had a question. I had a legal question, I guess. How does the agency really have the right to restrict a mattress store or a fast food chain? How do you distinguish them from other type of restaurants? Is that
Well, we have a contract where it's a term of a contract.
okay? So it's got nothing.
We don't
to
have
do
an
with-
obligation to
Okay.
sell it to them. It's a different animal than if we were sitting in sort of a regulatory capacity as, say, the Planning Commission, where you're trying to make those distinctions. But here we are, we're selling property, and we're saying we want to restrict some of the uses that go into there for a period of time.
Okay.
So how does it, can I follow up on that? How does that differ from the Avalon, where we wanted to have more restrictions and we couldn't? Why is this different?
I don't recall the Avalon scenario.
Amante, I think.
I think we also do have
Well, no, I'm talking about the
restrictions where we-
retail and the Avalon. We were told we couldn't say much about what went in there and what didn't.
We do have some approval rights over their uses.
Yeah, but not as extensive as we're asking for here.
Well, you agreed to something different at the time.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing that goes into when you start restricting the ability of somebody to bring tenants in and out based on their use is you affect their ability to get financing, because from the eyes of the bank, if they end up having to take the project over, they're not going to like that restriction on their ability to lease up the building. So it will cause some potential issues to get financing.
So basically, the difference here is the developer's willing to allow more restrictions
Correct.
than other developers have in the past. So.
Correct.
Okay.
I have one more question. What does it cost per square foot for the retail space that's going to be created here?
The rentals of a tenant there?
Right.
You mean the tenant improvements or
No, I mean the cost for a tenant to rent. How much is the space going to cost?
Oh, it's, to purchase the building, it's around, and I think it's likely to be an owner user, is $1,050,000. If it's leased, which I think is less likely, it's $1.75 a foot.
Okay.
Councilmember Fricke, do you have any comments?
Yeah, the reservation that I had when we had this on our agenda in the last meeting was that for the $2 million subsidy, we should provide the ability to restrict or to approve the use longer than 7 years. And as far as I can tell, that has not changed. And so I'm not going to support it.
Well, if we're focusing on this particular development and the resolutions that are in front of us, it has been a very extensive, very well thought out process. A lot of good staff work went into this. I think what we lose sight of when we just look at the dollars is that, or we just look at what San Pablo Avenue looks like today. We can't do that. We have to look at what is our vision for the future of San Pablo. And I think it's critically important that we keep that in mind. The dollars are very important. It's an investment of redevelopment agency money in revitalizing this particularly, no offense, Darrell, dismal blocks from 36th Street all the way up to 40th Street. We have got to move forward on this. And though I've seen your proposal, Darrell, and I really like it. I like the creativity of it. I like lots of different aspects of it. But I am determined to see that we get some action going along this 2-block stretch of San Pablo Avenue. I believe you were fully vetted by the Planning Commission. They took a lot of time with your project, and they had very, very good comments and suggestions that you responded to well. I'm in favor of moving ahead with this project, and I would call for a motion on it.
I have another question, actually.
Really?
You said something that kind of jogged me here, which is, I think, last time this came to us, I think staff were surprised by some of our questions and concerns that arose at that particular date, and I think you were surprised. So my question to both city staff and to us is it really fair to take a developer through the Planning Commission and get approval for something if it turns out we're not going to like it for particular reasons? Now, my main reason was I didn't want to add to blight by building a brand-new empty building, and that's been resolved because we're not going to turn the land over to you until there's going to be someone who occupies it. So my main concern has been alleviated in the language of the DDA, but more to the staff is this probably felt like something coming out of the 11th hour, and is there something about our process where we should be okay with moving ahead with something so that when the Planning Commission takes a developer through an extensive process, that there isn't going to be an 11th hour surprise?
Well, if I could respond to that, I guess I have two responses to it. One of the reasons why I think we may have looked surprised is that I think we've been careful to try and bring these development proposals to the council, the redevelopment agency, before we ask the developer to go through the process of getting planning commission approvals. And the reason why we do that is because we're cognizant of the fact that going through that approval process is a six-figure expenditure on the part of the developer. So we want to know conceptually, is the redevelopment agency okay with what's being pursued? So we did that with this project, and it was given the nod to go forward. And then we came back and we touched base at the point that we had a financial proposal, and we said, this is an expensive project, but we think for the long-term vision and revitalization of San Pablo Avenue, that's a worthwhile expenditure, and wanted to make sure there was support for that before we continued forward. So we've come back and we've touched base, and so I think that what you're seeing now is kind of the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of input, not only by the Planning Commission but also by the council. The second response to that is I know that I have been told by council on other projects that you want to make sure that there is a thorough community evaluation and input on all projects. And so you've asked staff to encourage developers to go out and have neighborhood meetings before the projects come to you, and to go through the planning commission before projects come to you. So I see that the process that we followed here is consistent with that direction.
Mayor, if I may just make a comment. Yeah, Daryl, I just want to say to you, I mean, that basically the only way we could really consider your project would be to turn down this DDA and kind of start over. And I really appreciate the creativity of what you're doing, and I'm somebody who really supports the art show and art in our community, but we are just way down this process, and, you know, that's a tough corner. And this developer came forward when nobody else was proposing anything, and came forward not just on this project, but two of them, and there's a synergy to those, and there's a commitment here, and this person has spent, you know, over $100,000 to bring this process along, so it's not, you know, we're just a little late here, and, you know, the kind of use that you'd like to see in there can well take place in there. We hope that it does. So I just, while I appreciate your creativity and I want to continue to encourage it, I don't think we can just stop dead in the tracks and say, gee, there's something that maybe we'd like better over here when we've gone through this whole process. And it's not just bureaucracy. I mean, it's a meaningful process in which everybody comes together, and there's been lots of opportunities for public hearings and public
Councilmember
input.
Cassis, is that a motion?
So I would move approval of
Do I have a
the
second?
DDA.
I'll second it.
All right, call the roll, please.
And that's on both resolutions of the agency and the city council?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Agency member and council member Bukowski.
Well, I'm going to support this, but it's reluctant because I'm really not sure that this project's going to work, and I really wish there was some way of making sure that retail space was going to be affordable, because if we want retail to work, we better make it affordable, otherwise it's not going to work. So I'm reluctantly supporting this, yes.
Agency member and council member Fricke.
I'm going to vote no for the same reasons that I mentioned at the last meeting and the meeting before that. And I'd like the record to reflect that the reasons I'm voting no is because the redevelopment agency is investing $2 million, and for that kind of money, there should be greater control over the use. I appreciate that we have that control for a 7-year period, but that's really not enough, because it could very well be that the first use does not succeed, and then there will be a second use, third use. I think that since the city, the redevelopment agency, owns the land, that we should have some control over the use.
Continue the roll call, please.
Agency member and council member Cassis.
Aye.
Vice chair and vice mayor Atkin.
I'm supporting this project too because of the changes that have taken place, and I want to thank Daryl for your ideas and vision too.
And chair and mayor Davis.
Aye. Okay, moving on to administrative